the United States has now imposed a 245% tariff on most Chinese imports into America.
These latest tariffs are very much in the Chinese playbook.
The shockwaves are still coming after Donald Trump's sweeping new tariffs on all imports into the United States.
Tariffs.
Picture this. You're reaching for your phone, sipping your morning tea, and casually browsing your favorite online store. But pause for a second. Have you considered how these simple moments are shaped by something much larger? The ongoing trade tensions between the US and China might feel like political noise in the background, but they're having a real impact on your everyday life. From the rising cost of your gadgets to shortages in everything from clothes to kitchen appliances, the global economy is shifting, and fast. Let's start with the basics. China is often called the world's factory. It produces a huge chunk of the everyday items we rely on, but with tariffs increasing and trade barriers rising, a big question emerges. Can China, whose economy is heavily export-driven, survive a global crisis if the world stops buying? But wait, what is even an economic crisis? An economic crisis doesn't always start with empty shelves or sky-high prices. It often begins behind the scenes, when producers can't sell what they make. In capitalist economies, this overproduction leads to factory shutdowns and mass layoffs. Then people lose their income and stop spending, which leads to even more shutdowns. It's a vicious cycle where goods pile up unsold, people are jobless, and resources sit unused. Sometimes, history has shown, countries even go to war just to hit the reset button. If China were a purely capitalist country, it would likely fall into the same trap. But here's the twist. China is a socialist state. It doesn't run on the same logic. In capitalism, we're told there's too much stuff when people stop buying. But if billions still live in poverty and can't access even basic needs, can we really say there's too much production? Think about it. How many of us take yearly trips to remote corners of the world or own luxury cars and villas? Most don't. Not because we don't want to, but because we can't. So, is there really overproduction, or is the problem deeper? No. What if consumption can't keep up with how we are producing? Well, that fear is based on a flawed assumption. Human wants are limitless. There's always something more people need or desire. In capitalist economies, consumption often lags, not because people don't want things, but because many simply can't afford them. The rich don't need much more, and the poor can't buy what they need. That's not a productivity problem, it's a distribution problem. This is exactly the kind of dysfunction socialism was meant to fix. And ironically, when America faced its own economic crises in the past, it didn't lean fully on capitalism. It relied on massive government intervention, what some would call a socialist approach. Meanwhile, Europe, which stuck closer to laissez-faire capitalism, spiraled into wars and collapse. In socialist systems, economic crises don't hit the same way. Their economies don't grind to a halt just because profit margins dip. The priority isn't squeezing out every cent. It's keeping people employed and production running. That's why China can weather storms that shake capitalist economies to their core. So, can China really be resilient in the face of a global economic crisis? Absolutely. Even if international demand dries up, China can keep the wheels turning. The government can step in to keep factories open, repurpose equipment, and redistribute goods domestically. Yes, this might slow down innovation or expansion, but it keeps people working and society stable. That's a trade-off many countries would gladly accept in a crisis. Historically, when global economic crises hit, capitalist nations usually start to unravel after just 2 or 3 years. By year 4, many face widespread unrest. In contrast, China's system is designed to endure. It may sacrifice some productivity gains, but it avoids total collapse. That endurance, more than speed, is what matters most in a crisis. But don't we still need foreign buyers to sustain China's production? Not really. That belief is another relic of capitalist thinking. In socialist economies, there's never a true surplus of goods because the needs of the people are vast. And while China does trade globally, its domestic market is huge enough to absorb much of its own output. This is where the conversation about overproduction becomes misleading. The issue isn't that there's too much stuff, it's that capitalist systems often lack a fair way to distribute it. In socialism, goods get where they're needed. Sure, progress might be a bit slower, but crises like those in capitalist nations are virtually non-existent. Here's something else to consider. Capitalism is brutally short-term. A factory might have made billions in the past, but if it starts losing money, it gets shut down. No questions asked. Profit is the heartbeat of capitalism. Without it, everything stops. And this is exactly why China doesn't play by those rules. In China, profit isn't the only motivator. Factories don't close the moment the books dip into the red. The state can step in to keep production alive, protect jobs, and stabilize supply chains. This isn't just about ideology. It's a strategic advantage. When the global economy wobbles, China doesn't tumble. It pauses, adapts, and waits. That patience often leads to long-term wins. So, what happens if global trade really breaks down? Who comes out stronger? Let's be honest, wars and economic destruction are terrible ways to reset the system. But when tariffs rise and countries retreat into their own markets, we're forced to ask, who can stand alone and still grow? All signs point to China. Donald Trump may have dismissed globalization, thinking it hurts America. But, ironically, globalization is what made America powerful in the first place. The US has a key advantage. It unites Europe and North America into a combined market of about 1 billion people. That's no small feat. It creates scale, lowers costs, and funds expensive innovation, especially in industries like semiconductors, where R&D costs can hit $10 billion. In those cases, selling to a huge market spreads out the cost. A chip that might cost billions to develop can become profitable if sold to hundreds of millions of people. That's the math behind modern capitalism. Scale equals survival. Now, enter China. With 1.4 billion people and rising incomes, China has turned itself into a supersized internal market. Trade flows easily between provinces, creating economies of scale that rival anything the West can offer. And when it comes to high-tech industries like smartphones or electric vehicles, China is racing ahead. Consider this. If every Chinese citizen spends just $300, $500 on a smartphone, that's a market of hundreds of billions of dollars. With world-leading manufacturing and domestic demand, China can drive prices down to unbeatable levels. This makes its goods attractive globally, even as tariffs rise. And in sectors like electric vehicles, China is already selling more than double what the US does. The secret? China's market is unified and wide open. That allows local companies to grow strong before even thinking about exports. Once they do expand abroad, they're lean, efficient, and hard to beat. It's not just about cheap labor. It's about massive scale and constant reinvestment. Even if global trade collapsed tomorrow, China would still have options. Its domestic market is big enough to maintain production. Other countries, especially smaller ones, would struggle. Modern products need complex supply chains and economies of scale. If each country had to produce everything it consumes, the costs would skyrocket. Except for China. This isn't just about surviving, it's about reshaping the global economic order. So, what's the takeaway? While Western nations built power through globalization, they now risk losing that edge by turning inward. China, on the other hand, is prepared. It has the market size, production capability, and state-driven resilience to weather economic storms, no matter how long they last. History has shown that productivity doesn't protect you from collapse. Systems do. And as crises come and go, the countries with the most durable systems, not just the flashiest GDP figures, are the ones that survive and lead. So the next time you unlock your phone or take that first sip of tea, remember, your everyday comforts are woven into the threads of a global system. And as that system shifts, it's worth asking not just where your products come from, but which systems are built to last when the world gets shaky.